is acrylic too. And this one is digital. And this one is also digital. This one I had in a show with a bunch of other illustrators, and I came up on two girls that were looking at this painting, and I just kind of eavesdropped a little bit, and they were going, "No, it's digital. It's got to be digital. I know this is digital. This is acrylic." So at that point, when I saw that people thought that my work was digital, I thought, well, it doesn't really matter if it's digital or acrylic. If people are thinking it's digital, I might as well work digitally. So in getting started, I use Photoshop CS2. It's a little bit older, but it works really good for me, and I don't see any reason to upgrade. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a techie guy. I don't go out and buy the latest upgrades. If something works, it works. I use a Wacom tablet. It's the Intuos 3, and I use the medium size. I use this exact size right here. I wish I had gotten the smaller tablet because I only use about a fourth of this area. You can activate a portion of the tablet to make active, and because I anchor my wrist, the ball of my wrist, and draw, I don't like to move my hand around. So I've just activated a small area. Okay, so I'm going to show you the paper that I paint on, or did paint on. Now I just use this paper for the texture that I paint on digitally. It's Arches Aquarel 140 pound hot press. And I like it because it's smooth to start out with, and I can put any texture that I want on there. And I don't have the watercolor paper texture showing through, so that's why. But you could do this with Masonite or anything else. Then I get a house brush, just an ordinary old beat-up house brush, and I use that to apply some gel medium. I use the gloss heavy texture gel from Liquitex. But you can experiment and use any kind of texture gel or gesso or whatever to make your texture. And I would encourage you to experiment and try to come up with your own unique texture to paint with. Okay. Again, this is just kind of the way I do it. Not the best way, just a way. So I take that texture gel that's kind of the consistency of a little bit lighter than peanut butter, and then I apply it onto the paper. Okay. So here you can see that paper right here. It's flimsy. I cut it to the size of the scanner so it'll just fit right on there so I can scan it. And after it dries, I paint it black, and then I dry brush white paint over the top. And that way the computer can see the peaks and the valleys, the tops of the mountains and the valleys. Okay. Okay, so then we're going to go into Photoshop here, and I'm just going to try to explain. So if this is your surface that you're painting on, let's turn it so it's at an angle. And this is after you put your texture on there, you have little peaks and valleys. So I'm going to kind of describe what goes on. Here's another view of that, where you have your texture and you can feel it. It's got bumps or ridges or whatever. And then here's a blown up view. You've got these basically mountains and valleys, right? And so if I take a wet burnt sienna color or some kind of a warm color and I paint that wet, it's going to go on top of the mountains and down in the valleys. It's just going to cover the whole texture, okay? But then if I take a light color and I dry brush it, really dry, almost like if you were painting dryness on top of wood, it just wouldn't go in the cracks. So, and then if I paint a little bit wetter, not totally wet, but a little bit wetter, it'll go down in there further, or if I push harder. But it doesn't get all the way down into the valleys. And that's kind of how I've gotten the look that I've gotten with the textures. I have a different color shining through in some places, not all the time, but in some places. And I could have bought an expensive scanner. They come with all kinds of bells and whistles. But I use probably one of the cheapest scanners that they make out there, and I think I got it free when I bought my computer. It's just a little tiny flatbed scanner, and it works great. Just a little Epson. And so I scan that texture into Photoshop, and now I'm going to kind of talk about what I do next. So I'm going to name this texture. So I'm just going to save it onto my computer, and for lack of a better name, I'm just going to call it texture because I'm in the creative industry, right? Excuse that black box. I don't know why that shows up and covers up my cursor, but it does in this software. So then I'm going to go to edit, and this is very important. You go to define pattern. Okay, this is with that texture document open. And then you can leave it called whatever you named it first, or you can change it to some fancy name or something, it lets you relabel it. And then when you click OK, it automatically will put that in a texture palette. Now, you don't see that right now, but it does. It's already in there. Okay, now you can find that by going to Window and then to Brushes. You can always get to your brush palette that way. There's other ways to get to it, but that's how you get to it. Okay, click the box marked texture right there. Click the word texture also. It's already highlighted, but you can click that. Then right here under this little arrow, that's where the texture showed up right there. That's the one I just scanned and put in there. You could use canvas, you could use wood, you could put anything in there, okay? And now that's a texture that's in Photoshop. It will stay in there. It will remember it. You turn your computer off, it's still there. So Photoshop has got that file now. And you can day after day when you paint, you can use that file, okay? So now I'm going to come down here, and I'm getting another brush. I went to my brush palette there. I got texture highlighted. I got texture checked, and this is the scale of the texture. So I'm just going to get a brush so we can see here. I just got a brush size, a round brush. That's what I paint with all the time, is a round brush. No fancy brushes. And this is the scale or the size that your texture will show up on your painting, So you can have it really small, really fine, or you can have really huge texture. And anything in between, just whatever you prefer. And you're going to have to experiment with that to find, how much texture you want. Very important right here, this needs to be on multiply. That setting, none of this will work if that's not on multiply right there. Okay. Now this slider right here is the depth slider, and that shows that's the key. One of the biggest keys is that shows whether you're painting in the peaks, on top of the peaks, or in the valleys, or both. Okay, and that's a very big determining factor. So I'm just going to turn the texture off right here just by unchecking that. Now I'm not going to be painting with any texture, and I'm going to put a flat paint down, just a warm color here, and just kind of try to tone this little canvas down, this virtual canvas, right? And then I'm going to go and turn that texture back on. I'm going to click that box right there. And then I've got the scale kind of, right in the middle. I'm going to get a lighter color, kind of a blue color to complement this warm color here. And this is my opacity and my flow. We'll deal with that a little bit later. And I'm just going to lay down. Now this is a medium depth right here. So I'm just painting on that. And if you look, the paint is actually going on top of the peaks and it's going down in the valleys, but not all the way down in the valleys. Okay? So you can still see some of the red showing through. Now this is really wet paint, or simulates it. So if you have a depth that is really low, that means you're painting on top of the peaks and down into the valleys. Okay? Now if I take this slider, go back to the brush palette, you can also get it from the window drop down menu. Let's move that slider all the way to the right, and now we're almost only painting on the peaks. And so you can see down in those valleys there's lots of red shining through. And this is how you can control how much texture shows up in your painting with that slider, which I leave alone most of the time, and I control it more with the opacity and flow, and I'll show you that. But basically I set mine about 70%, and I leave it there for pretty much the whole painting. That's 70%, so it's mostly on the peaks, but also down in the valleys some. Now, this is a really low flow or low opacity right here, so it's not covering very much. It's not much paint coming out. Let's turn those up really high flow, high opacity, and you have a lot more paint. I typically set my flow to around 30%, and I move the opacity all the way from 100 down to 10 and everywhere in between. I'm always adjusting how much coverage I'm getting with the paint. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that is pretty much the secret that a friend of mine, Jed Henry, showed me on how to paint in Photoshop and how to get my textury feeling. That's it. Okay, so this is the thumbnail sketch that I started with, and you probably have no idea what it even is, and that's a good thing because I'm designing at this point. This little thumbnail I did in my sketchbook. And I always start with a thumbnail, do a bunch of them, and then move to a comp, and then a finished sketch. And so now I'm going to make a case for doing thumbnails, and I actually went over this in the How to Illustrate Children's Books video series, but I'm going to do it again because I really believe in this, and I think that this is not taught right most of the time in schools. The reason to do thumbnails isn't because it's so much quicker, isn't because it's easier. It's because, well, let me back up and just say, take a look at this this typewritten piece of paper here, and do you notice anything different about it? And I think you'll notice that it's blurry on the edges and it's clear towards the center. And so what I want you to do is take a piece of typewritten paper on your own, pause the video or something, and look at it and see how many words you can read. Focus in on one word in the middle and see how many words you can read before and after that word without moving your eyes. Also above and below that word. And most people think, oh, I can read a lot of words around that area. And really, you can only read a few words without moving your eyes. And that what happens is when we glance at a piece of paper or a picture or something, our eyes are dancing and moving all over that. And what that does is it doesn't allow us to see the positive and negative spaces all at the same time. So when you draw on a thumbnail sketch, you're able to design the spaces using simple shapes. You're not drawing, but you're designing. You're moving furniture around. And so what you're doing is you can focus on the whole entire area, and because you can see it, you can really examine those relationships better than you can at a larger size. Okay, so that's my case for making thumbnail sketches. I really believe in it. Didn't used to do it when I first started, by the way. This picture right here is really what gave me the idea for this painting, and I just thought it was kind of neat that these people are riding on top of an elephant, but that's kind of ordinary. What if I changed the animal to a really small animal that we normally see as a small animal, but that is huge, and we have little tiny people on it. And it's just not ordinary. So, I started with the idea of a frog, and so this is a little frog right here. Can you tell? And and then I move up and I start to draw a little bit more, and I put some little indications of people up there. And because I'm a children's book illustrator, I want them to be kids. I also want to create an image that has a little tension where you don't know whether the frog is good or bad, but he's not scary. He's not super scary, but we're just not sure. There's a little bit of tension in this picture is what I was going for. Okay. So I'm drawing thumbnails. I'm refining a little bit. I'm looking at reference. I get as many things as I can think of that I think will fit in the painting and throw those in there. With visual reference, I'm really looking for accuracy in my drawing to be able to convey certain objects and certain plant life and animals really well. Kind of get the feeling, the atmosphere. And then when I've done a little bit of drawing and really kind of get my brain around it, I start to draw a little bit more detail. And so here's a frog, some indications of some kids on top. Kind of designing those little characters, those little kids. And then at the bottom there, I really try to draw them the way I really want them. And, I didn't have a lot of time doing this. I'm teaching a couple classes right now, and I'm working on some book projects with some publishers and some of my own projects and stuff. And so I really didn't spend as much time drawing and designing this as I probably should have, because I really wanted to get this out. So really, I should have a lot more sketches to show. But so what I do now is I'll take this main drawing, and I don't know if you noticed before, but I'm just going to open up that document here. Let me find it. So this is out of my sketchbook here. So we'll just open that up into Photoshop CS2. And, I didn't have room, or it was just so small in my sketchbook. I didn't draw the kids up in this sketch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these kids from down here that I drew really nicely because I was able to draw them bigger. And I'm going to show you how, and then I do this all the time. I piece sketches together by grabbing parts that I really like so I don't lose them in the redraw. So I'm going to get a new document here, and I'm going to make the resolution 200 dpi, open it up, and oops, I made a horizontal. So I'm also making this for maybe people who aren't as familiar with Photoshop. So you go into image size right here and make sure those are on inches there so you can kind of get an idea of how big you want this. And I think I'm going to make this like a 9 by 12, right? Now I have to uncheck constrain proportions right there so that it will allow me to change one dimension without resizing the whole image. So I can make that 9 inches wide and 12 inches high. Click OK, and now I've got my document and it's zoomed in. So let's zoom out here a little bit. And there's your 9 by 12 tall. That's going to be my canvas that I'm going to work on there. Okay. I'm using the zoom tool, and there's how to zoom out, zoom in. Also, if you hit Alt on your keyboard, you can do it quicker. You can toggle between zooming out and zooming in. It's really good to learn the key commands for shortcuts. This is the marquee tool I'm going to get here, and I'm going to just drag that around my sketch. I'm going to come over and grab the move tool. Okay. I'm going to move over it. Now you might want to skip over this if you're already really familiar with Photoshop. Just kind of skip a little bit along, and you might want to move to the painting if you want. But if you already know this kind of stuff, but a lot of people don't, and these are skills that you need to develop over time to kind of learn how to work in Photoshop. Grab the corner with the move tool again. I can rotate it, get it straightened up, drag it open, make it a little bit bigger, grab it, click and drag and move it around, get it where you want it. And then none of those changes will take effect until I click the move tool again and hit apply. So you have to go back to the move tool, you have to click it again, the apply dialog box will come up, click apply. Okay. Again, I apologize for the black square. I know it's annoying. I don't know how to get rid of it. I'm not tech savvy. Going to grab the lasso tool, and I'm going to cut these. This will allow me to select the little boy and the little girl and basically cut them out of my sketchbook and drag them into my painting area, my canvas. So this is I'm clicking and using Alt to Alt click so that I can control the selection a little bit better. It's easier. I like to do it that way. You can also just freehand it, just click and drag that little selection around. Again, we're on the lasso tool. And now we're going to go back up. We're going to grab the move tool. Okay, very important to learn the move tool. And just click and drag that right onto your canvas. And what that does is that automatically made a new layer right there. And when I put the sketch on there, that made a new layer too. Now if I turn that eyeball off, then I can't see my sketch. It's still there, but you're allowed to just not see it. It just kind of turns it invisible. And I'm going to label this my sketch. This will, if you label your layers, it kind of helps you to keep track of them. I'm going to call this one kids. And again with the move tool, just kind of move them up and put them in the basket area. Okay. Now I'm going to resize by grabbing the corners, click and drag, move, kind of see if I can feel about where it's right. Trying to imagine, she's too big, she's on top of the leaf there, make her smaller. Just kind of move her around until she feels right. Not looking at the boy yet. In fact, I should have just grabbed the girl and then just grabbed the boy, but I will show you how I can fix that too. Right here, I'm going to select, actually I'm going to select the kids layer. I'm going to click on the kids right on the word, hit duplicate layer, it's going to give me a brand new layer. So now I have two identical layers with the kids on them. Okay. So now I have to select the boy, and I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard and just delete him right out of there. Now he's gone. Okay, on that layer. He's still there on the other layer. So it gets a little confusing sometimes. But he's gone on the top layer. Okay. So there you can see. Now he's there on the layer down right there. So now I'm going to select that layer. I'm going to cut the girl out and delete her. Let me hit the delete button. Now she's gone. Now I've got the boy on the bottom, the girl up on top, and so I'm going to just relabel those layers. There's the girl, and there's the boy. That didn't sound right. Okay. So there's your boy. And just kind of resize him. And here's the girl. We got the layers relabeled. Zooming in just so you can see a little bit better. Now we got a problem here because the basket is behind the girl and the boy. So we got to get the basket in front. So what I'm going to do there is I'm actually going to turn these off just so we can understand what we're doing better. And I'm going to right click on the sketch layer and I'm going to duplicate that. I think. Nope. I'm going to click and drag with the lasso tool first. And trying to figure out what I'm doing. I'm going to hit copy. There's so many different ways to do this. And sometimes I use different ways. Then I'm going to use paste. What that did when I hit paste, it just made a new layer with that selection on it. So if I turn the sketch off, you can just see that little area that I just copied and pasted. And I'm going to call that the basket. Okay, now I was on the sketch layer when I did that. Usually your problems will happen when you're on the wrong layer. And when I say you're on the wrong layer, see what's highlighted in blue? When sketch is highlighted in blue, you're on that layer. Right now, we're on the sketch layer. Okay. So if I turn the sketch layer off, you can see that it's off. If I turn the basket on, you can see it's on. But we're not, you can see a layer and not be on it. You're only on a layer if it's highlighted in the blue there. Okay. So right now, I'm on the basket. I'm going to move the basket to the top, and voila, it's in front now. So the layers that are up at the top of the list, they're in front. The layers that are in the middle are in the middle, and the layers that are in the back are in the back. So now I'm going to grab the eraser because there's a problem here. There's pieces of that basket that we copied, above the basket that are covering up our sketch. So with the eraser, and I'm just going to erase that part off, and I'm on the basket layer, so I'm only erasing on the basket layer. Just going to erase that part of the sketch right off of there, and so now the kids look like they're in the basket. And if I turn off some of these layers, I think I'm going to do that real quick here. So let's turn off. Let's zoom in a little bit here. And now there's the girl layer. What if we put her on top? See? Just by moving those layers around, things jump in front or in back. And that's something that it took me, it's embarrassing, but it took me years to realize that. All you had to do is click and drag those stinking layers. I never took a Photoshop class, so I just kind of learned as I went along. And I actually like learning like that. I like learning one thing at a time because I don't remember a whole lot if I'm trying to learn it all at one time. That's basically it. So now I've got my sketch. And so now I can... I'm using a different capture program right now. I'm not going to do the zoom anymore, while I'm trying to show you how I paint because it's too annoying to be constantly zooming. But I wanted to show it for, being able to see what I'm clicking on up there, what tools and stuff. But right now, I didn't finish out this little baby because it was so small that I just figured I can actually freehand this with the paintbrush tool. So I'm just on the paintbrush tool, and I've got some black selected there. I'm just going to kind of draw him in there. Took me a long time to be able to get the control to do this with the Wacom tablet. If you actually, if you use the Wacom tablet instead of a mouse for a few months, you'll start to get it real quick. It's annoying at first, really frustrating, and you're going to be saying to yourself, there's no way I can do this. This just feels too foreign, and it will. It's like learning how to ride a bike, but you got to start somewhere. And if you use it to navigate around your computer instead of the mouse, yes, it will be frustrating. Yes, it will take you longer to navigate. But the more you do it, the better you'll get. And I have a friend that doesn't draw any more on paper. You know, I still draw on paper because it feels right to me. And he does beautiful, absolutely beautiful paintings. Jim Madsen, you can look him up. And he does everything on the Wacom tablet. He doesn't like the Cintiq monitor either. The Cintiq monitor is one that you actually draw on. So now I'm just going to get the crop tool. I'm going to crop my painting. So I still have a little extra white left all the way around because that's where I can overpaint the image. And that's about it. Now we're ready to move on to the next video.